a civil case, that was going to be a detriment.
All right, everybody. We're here. I'm joined with Kelly, Travis, Big Jeff, Calf, and we're nothing new. We're just going over Stephen Avery's criminal history, going back from the 1980s to where we are now. And we were talking to him before about all his cases prior, so figure bring up his activity report. Let's see, right here. All right, this was generated on February 2nd of 2016 by Larry Ledvina from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. This is basically everything that Stephen Avery has done. They got all the visits with Jody, his whole activity report up until 2016. Now, these Manitowoc Police Department cases are unavailable. Tried FOIAing them. They won't release anything. And they're from 83, 87, 88, and 88. So he was incarcerated for majority of those. So who knows what they could be. But if we scroll down here to the bottom, we can go to what this is the Penny Bernstein tag right here, 729.85. He was initially charged.
I can tell you what those others probably are if you want, Millbilly. If you want to go back up, I can tell you what those are.
Oh, for sure.
This is educated guess, but y'all remember when he was corresponding with his ex-wife over contact with his kids?
Yes.
And some of those letters and correspondence, I think, popped up. So this type of a log here would list you, we call it an involvement check. So you'd be listed here if you were a witness to a crime, you were a victim of a crime, you were a suspect in a crime. So your involvement can be multifaceted. And I would suspect if those are in fact when he was incarcerated, that they may be revolving around the letters going back and forth with his ex-wife that she reported as being threatening. And Stephen talked about that, I think, in some interviews while he was in jail.
Yes. Jail calls. The jail calls too, he talks about it.
Yeah. And some of those letters, I think, they came up in the state filed, that they were going to use extraneous conduct in his trial that he's in prison for now, the Teresa Hallbach murder trial. They filed notice of intent to use extraneous offenses, and a lot of this background stuff that we're talking about, that's where we learned about it. It was all listed out. And some of that extraneous conduct that the judge did not allow the jury to hear was discussed about threatening communications with his ex-wife regarding, or she may have been his current wife at the time, but his wife, the mother of his children, about visitation, custody, contact, that type of stuff. And that's what I suspect that is. And that's why it would be redacted, is it involved minors and that sort of thing, and there's statutory stuff on why that would be redacted.
Now, I want to know why on his record, the 04 fire, like you mentioned, it's because he has contact with it. Why isn't it closed or disposed?
Which one are we looking at here?
So the 04 fire of Barb's Laser.
Barb's Blazer is stolen, or correct. It's reported being seen on fire. The call comes into the fire department and the sheriff's department. They respond to the scene for the blazer fire, and then it's reported stolen. Now, we know that the Averys have car scanners and police scanners, so did they hear it come over a scanner and then report it stolen? But that whole situation is just messed up. I just don't understand why it's not disposed. Does that mean it's still an open case?
I'm going to have to look at those closer and get back to you. So police have investigations that get officially closed out, and then of course lawyers and prosecutors have cases, and clerks' offices list cases as being open, closed. But depending upon the reporting system, sometimes things don't get closed out. Have you been able to obtain any of the background information with open records request on what the nature of the report was, or
well, I got the summary and the incident report for the 04 fire, but as to actual officers' notes, no.
Okay, I can take a look at that later on and get back to you with some notes. Every department's different, and then of course every call's different, and so if your car catches on fire while you're driving down the road, that gets reported one way, and departments vary in the way they take reports on different types of matters. Some it's just they log something in. Others it has to be more formal, and and there's a case number attached to it, right? Which case number is it?
SO4 08530.
Got it. Okay, I can see your mouse on it now. Car fire, stolen vehicle. Yeah, if you can send me the summary on that.
Will do.
Hard to say why not disposed. And then I guess there's the indecent exposure down at the bottom. That's not disposed of either.
Nope.
And there could be a number of reasons for that, including that a clerk never went back in and indicated what had happened with it. There's a lot of different reasons. And then there's more here. Let's see.
That's
another indecent exposure.
I wonder if that was Santa Moritz.
And then
hit and run.
Stolen items. And there's even
What's that other one not disposed? Tire what?
Theft. Tire rims. Lamachi. Theft of tire and rims, I'm guessing.
And was he the victim in that?
No. Just like this one. This is the Sandra Morris abduction suspect. And they got all of his court transport threat, blah, blah.
Hard to say why there's not a disposition date. Normally they track when, so if a person is arrested as a suspect or a report is done, most law enforcement agency reporting systems like this will have a disposition date that coincides with the case either being dismissed, the date that a person entered into a plea, or the date of a trial is usually a disposition date. The more modern systems wouldn't allow for there not to be a date there. It would indicate pending, open, undetermined, there would be a reason why there's an absence of a date there.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm late.
This is the Marie Avery incident right here. 8/11 to 8/26/04. It was disposed because Queso was told to stop investigating because Candy Avery was no longer cooperating after they informed her that they were going to be talking to Al and Dolores. And initially, when Candy Avery reported the sexual contact with her daughter and Stephen Avery, she contacted Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, and for some God knows reason, they did the right thing and recused them from them and passed it on to Queso. But they didn't do that in the Halbach case. We all know that. They lied about being there.
What was the accident? That he was involved in a car accident, or?
That might have been when he got hit by a car. He was struck by a vehicle crossing the street.
Yeah, so there wouldn't usually be a disposition on that. They're just showing up to the scene of an accident, and they open up a report, and then some things, they're just responding out to the scene and they take a report, but there's no
if you look at the way it transpired, we got the Marie incident, and then something happened between the family and Stephen.
Isn't that when they got in a big argument?
Yeah, over the Marie.
Yeah.
And then, 12 days later, we got the car fire. Not to mention, the 17th of September, he goes on the news and is talking. Well, at first he went on the news on September 11th. He was talking about his lawsuit. September 17th, he went on the Fox 6 News to talk about how he was adjusting to life and how it feels to be free. And then 4 days later, car fire. And during the investigation, I don't know what detectives actually talked to Barb, Yonda, and everybody the night of the incident, but they didn't follow up until 10 days later, and the first person they talked to is Stephen Avery, just because he happened to be home. They're going there to talk to Barb, talk to Stephen. It doesn't make any sense. Barb and Stephen are the only ones that had keys to this Blazer.
Yeah, but see over on the right, aren't those indication, the far right, victim, complainant, O may be observer, witness, S is suspect. It depends on what his role is. Aren't those on the far right? Isn't that what his role is? O, I'm guessing, is observer, like witness, victim of an explosion.
He wasn't even home. Barb gets home, gets dropped off by.
What do they show him as? What's his role that they show him as?
It says 0.
So they're just talking to him as like, hey, did you see anybody take your sister's car? That's
yeah. Well, that's the thing.
Could be anything.
Barb notices the Blazer's gone. Only him and her have keys to it. Stephen then comes home with Jody, and she waits until it's reported on fire before she reports it stolen. First person on the property after they all left in the morning to go to school, go to work, is Bobby Dassey. And then he goes off with Mike O. The law enforcement never verifies his alibi that he was with Mike O. It's just like Tom Yonda. He claims he was at Menards. They never talked to him. And Michael Bushman is the one that ends up closing out, taking over the case. The same arresting officer that arrested him in 1985. When his uncle persuaded him.
That's pretty
If
common
it's the line
in
I'm
small
looking at, is
towns.
C
The
and
same
B.
arresting officers over and over and over again. If you have people that continue to engage in criminal conduct, it's not unusual for the same person over and over. But I can't figure out why. So she reported her blazer stolen after it caught on fire.
Correct.
So she was making a false insurance claim, maybe?
The insurance claim ended up getting played up. But that's the thing, though.
It's really on fire. It was really on fire.
Yeah.
And I don't think she really put it on fire herself. So
Just the blazer's gone.
I don't think that it was false.
And Stephen comes home at like 6 o'clock, and it's not set on fire till after 9 p.m.
But they're only talking to him as a witness, right? He's never charged with anything for that.
No, but when Mark Wiegert is interviewing Jody Stokowski after she's released, they bring up this 04 fire as in he had something to do with it.
I got you. I'd forgotten completely about that.
Got to look at how they first they went after Marie, trying to get her to say something so they could bring more charges against them. She doesn't flip. Then they go after Jody.
Oh, she did flip.
But they didn't get anything.
August, she won't cooperate, or her mother won't cooperate.
They can't bring any charge. Well, but that was
in January. She brings in all that other information, which she since has recanted. But in January,
and a diary.
Yeah, and then there's some phone calls that one of you all obtained where she's talking to Brendan, or anyway, y'all obtained something. Marie was in a completely different mindset in January of 2005 than where she is currently.
Mm-hmm. But yeah. So he breaks into the bar, apparently, according to this, 3 times. And then the third time he got caught. He stole a toolbox, $12 worth of quarters out of a pool table, 2 cases of beer, and 2 cheese sandwiches.
Zooming on that, Elderly.
Sentenced to 2 years and only served 10 months. And then
this is the criminal mastermind robbing the same place 3 times.
And then we have Cat Instinct, which we all know that he took the blame for. So Mr. Yanda with Y, not a J, was on probation. He then gets sentenced and gets out. He got a fine, probation. And then we have his whole timeline from 1985 all the way to 2003. This is pertaining to the Penny Bernstein case. And how did that come about, him being fingered as the suspect?
Will that go any bigger?
Yeah, I can make it bigger. Oh, hold on. 1 second, please. Sorry, everybody. Which one was it?
That's okay.
This one right here?
No, the timeline one.
The whole history together, the next one. That one.
That better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, see. 36-year-old Manitowoc woman is badly beaten and sexually assaulted as she jogs along the Lake Michigan shoreline, north of Two Rivers. At about 3:50 p.m., she gives investigators a description of the attacker, leading officers to arrest Stephen Avery later that night at his home in Maryville area. She later identifies Avery as her assailant through photographs and live police lineup. Now, how did she come to identify Stephen Avery? Jeff?
Yeah, that was the whole civil case.
Well,
You're gonna,
well, she identified Stephen Avery through a combination of a set of photographs that was presented to her by Eugene Couchet, if you remember that name, and she picked Avery out of the police lineup, and then they had out of the set of photos. Excuse me, and then they had a police lineup the next day, and Avery was the only one in the lineup. He was the youngest one in the lineup, for one thing. I think he was the shortest one in the lineup, and he also, I mean, he'd been in prison. He'd been in custody for a few days. He was kind of the most frazzled of all the people, and so it was a combination of the lineup of the photograph array and the lineup. He was the only one in both the photograph array and the lineup. So that's the initial identification, and there's also a police sketch involved there. If you go through the depositions and you read about the 1985 trial, that's one of the things that was a big deal, because if you look at that photo, you can find a photo online. If there's some photos that overlay Couchet's police sketch with one of Avery's arrest photos, and it's an extremely close match. So what was suspected by Ed Lloyd, Stephen's attorney at the time, was that Couchet had actually ordered the picture prior to the actual time that the sketch was supposed to be made, did the trace and kind of substituted the trace for the description that Penny was giving, pretending to draw a picture, but then sliding this picture in, which is actually a trace of one of Stephen Avery's mugshot pictures. So that's one of the things that sort of led Penny down the path. But it goes on from there. How deep do you want to go? Penny Bernstein, when Stephen is in custody for a while, starts to have doubts that he was actually the one. For one thing, I mentioned to you, Travis, earlier before the live, about some of the descriptions. A lot is made about how much Stephen Avery actually looks like Gregory Allen. To tell you the truth, Stephen Avery doesn't look anything like Gregory Allen. Nope. Penny Bernstein described him as having brown eyes. Stephen has blue eyes. Being partially balding. Stephen has a full head of hair. There's a lot of descriptions. That's some of the things that Vogel's attorney starts to bring up in the deposition that we talked about. Believe it or not, why would Vogel's attorney do that? Because it seems to me that he's trying to shift the blame. This wasn't a problem with the prosecution of Stephen Avery. This is a problem with Stephen getting it into trial in the first place. So that's very interesting to me that during the during the 2005 deposition, that Vogel's attorney seems to be, pushing the blame towards law enforcement, which was all the more alarming reason why they needed to take take Stephen out. Even more so, another one of the things that they talk about it in that case is Penny starting to feel like it's not maybe it wasn't Gregory Allen that did this to me. It all happened so fast. So she actually phones the sheriff's office, says she talks to Kasurek. Kasurek says he doesn't remember. Also, the Manitowoc deputy police chief, whose name is Bergner, says he claims that he goes and talks to Kasurek, and whether Kasurek, who claims that he knows nothing about any of the surveillance that was going on Gregory Allen, they even had a special name for him called the Sandman. They called him. They had this. He was such a well-known sexual assailant. They had a name for him because he showed up at night and broke into people's houses and did some pretty vile things, and thus the Sandman nickname. One of the things in his MO was that he would call his victims on the telephone, after assailing them, just to terrorize them even further. Penny Bernstein started to get phone calls, so she called the Manitowoc County Police, and according to Michael Griesbach, and this guy this guy Bergner actually brought Penny Bernstein with him to talk to Kasurek about the fact that Penny didn't believe that that Gregory Allen was the one. Kasurek claims no knowledge of being, he can't remember at all being talked to by Bergner. He had no knowledge of the Manitowoc police investigation. But according to Michael Griesbach, Penny Bernstein accompanied him. I think you have that. You think you have that audio, Millbilly, if Travis wants to hear it. It's just astounding, the things that Kasurek is denying. So we start to stack up things. Yeah, can you imagine sitting, because Kasurek was scheduled to be deposed the day after Stephen was arrested, right? That was his deposition date. Wouldn't you love to be the lawyer that was sitting down questioning Kasurek and saying, "Hey, look, do you remember when Bergner and Penny Bernstein showed up at your office?" Can you imagine? And this was a very dire situation for a very important power broker in the county. And when things start to go south, and you're a power broker, and and people are paying attention to you in Madison, with things like the Avery bill, you have to resort to some pretty desperate measures to be able to get yourself out of hot water. And to me, that's what they did. And frankly, that's why I'm a truther. So
Yeah.
I could go on and on.
Yeah, I personally, I disagree that the impending deposition of Kasurek led them to take drastic measures, because they had Marie on a silver platter, but it's really neither here nor there. They had taken depositions before Marie made her allegation, 3 or 4, and you all have those. The critical thing is what the big gift was for Stephen and his civil attorneys, Walt Kelly and Stephen Glenn, and they talked about this in MAM 1 and subsequently, is that the AG's report, where the AG's office went and talked to these people, and Walt and had that, and they had said all of these things to the investigators that were completely inconsistent with their deposition testimony. And we saw one segment in MAM where the woman described Stephen as being dirty, and she told that to an AG investigator, and then she denied it, and she said, "No, I didn't say that." And then later on, she said, "Well, not in those words." And
Judy Dvorak, you're talking about.
Pardon?
Judy Dvorak.
Yeah, and that was on and on and on. But from the other innocence files and things that you all have seen, pre-DNA, the way he was, he was railroaded in that 85 case. with tunnel vision and confirmatory bias. And you see that over and over and over again with pre-DNA era sexual assault cases, pre-DNA, where DNA started to come in and it's based solely on an identification. And then the wrongful conviction sexual assault cases, when DNA comes in and there's DNA to test, you see over and over and over again a victim of sexual assault being led or manipulated into identifying a suspect. And, you know, there's all kinds of reasons why: pressure from the police. The Bernsteins are a old family in that town, run the candy store, you know, well respected, involved in the business community. So, you know, they end up trying to make a big push, and whether there's other elements to it also, because it sounded like Stephen to them, but it looked pretty clear to me that she had been shown photographs of Stephen and probably told other things like, we're pretty sure this is the guy. Doesn't this look like him? And from afar, you know, they both had beards and looked, with all apologies, you know, that period of time, Stephen was kind of in his scruffy mode, and Allen looked scruffy. But yeah, that's the problem, and that's why you had hundreds of DNA exonerations based solely on the witness victim ID. Police, you know, based on a hunch or a gut feeling or whatever you want to call it, said, yeah, you know, we're pretty sure it's this. And next thing you know, yeah, blue eyes become brown, and 6'3" becomes 5'7", and all kinds of crazy things. And you just see that over and over and over again from that era. And then in Stephen's case, like a lot of cases, they were able to show that the fingernail scrapings didn't, the material that they recovered from underneath the victim's fingernails didn't match Stephen. And the state said, oh, that's not good enough. That could have come from a EMS worker. That could have come from her husband, but they had her husband's DNA. And, you know, fighting on that. And then the Wisconsin Innocence Project, fortunately, you know, got down to that hair that fortunately had DNA on it, the root bulb, because most hair doesn't have any DNA in it. And, you know, that's 3 years later from that. Plus the fact that when they arrested Allen on another, that's the most tragic part of all of this, is that Allen committed subsequent crimes, right? He had more victims.
Yeah, the sad thing about this one, and then nobody was charged for the attack. They didn't charge Gregory Allen because of statute of limitations. So nobody got charged for the attack on Penny Bernstein, but Stephen Avery spent 12 years of his life in prison because of it.
And then didn't Allen commit a subsequent offense and then
he's in prison
in another county, and then admitted he was the perpetrator in Penny Bernstein's, and that was the call to Andy saying, we think you got the wrong guy in jail?
Brown County contacted Manitowoc and talked to Andy Coleman.
Yes.
And
I mean, it's just absolutely.
You know, Travis, I'd like to believe that I'd like to believe that the initial conviction of Avery was something that was sort of accidental. You know, they didn't like him, but they were pretty sure it was him, so they went to extraordinary measures. I'd actually like to believe that. But having read the depositions and you know the amount of shenanigans that even went into the writing of the Pagel report, I don't believe that. I honestly believe that this was for the Sandra Morris incident when Sandra was to Manitowoc County deputy sheriff, and this was payola for that. Kosurik went to Vogel, and sort of the hearsay, the inadmissible hearsay that you can read in the depositions was Kosurik went to Vogel and said, "Don't fuck this up," right? And when the Manitowoc police to the Manitowoc sheriff, I think this is Gregory Allen, he said, "No, we got the right guy." He wanted Avery to go away then. And that's what I believe deeply, and I have other examples beside this. I love to believe that it was sort of an accident time because that would not take away a little bit my faith in humanity. This is a just miscarriage of justice going all the way back to 1985. They died him his constitutional right of not even be able to make a phone call for over 7 days when they first incarcerated him. If you read the extent that Kosurik went to make sure that he went to jail, him and Vogel together, then to me this is just an example of just a tremendous railroading. I mean, he had a tremendous alibi. The jury ignored umpteen witnesses, 17 witnesses that weren't from his family because he was helping his family pour concrete. His cousin who worked for his uncle who worked for the sheriff's office, Arlen Avery, was one of the people who saw this shirt. The people who did the drive test because he had receipts from a particular food court in a mall where he brought his family, and his family consisted of him, his wife, and what newborn twins and 2 other kids, 4 or 5 kids, and the only way that the timeline worked was if he spent 0 time getting his family in the car, drove his family to the beach, parked them at the beach while he went and committed the rape, and came back and then got in the car to drive back to Manitowoc. And it's literally unbelievable, the timeline that would have had to have happened for to be able to actually commit this crime. And it was well known, and to me, this was a railroading by Kosurik, payola for you don't mess with Manitowoc County sheriffs because this is what happens to you in Corruptawak. I believe that you're right about 99% of the cases. Back in the time wasn't DNA. This case, I think they did it to him on purpose, and I think it was obvious. I think that was coming out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna play that little clip.
Sorry, I don't mean to go off.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's I've seen a lot of these, and they all fit this pattern. And the problem is, you have with the theory that law enforcement, that Kosurik sees all these problems coming, and they keep telling them, man, we got to do something. Okay, go out and kill somebody and plant it on the Avery salvage yard, and all of our problems will be solved. That's a pretty big step. And why, if you're willing to do that,
I never said they killed somebody. I've always believed that they exploited some tragedy. That's
or it's just much easier in August when they've given depositions, when they've got an offense that's my understanding 60 years he would have been facing on Marie, that you could, it would be easier to pressure her and her mother into making a formal complaint than it would be to have law enforcement involved in either actively committing a murder or taking a body that was found and staging that to look like a murder. It would just be way easier. And I realize that goes against a lot of people's theories that they developed. And they were able to bring out all of the missteps, and some which I think were completely intentional, purposeful, going out to get Stephen because of the prior incident with the cousin that's married to law enforcement. I totally agree with you that
Sandra Morris. Yeah.
Easy to set up that railroad, but I think it's the civil case being impetus to frame up Stephen because Kosurik's deposition was around the corner. To me, now, when did the report come out about when they did that come out before the deposition started in the summer of 2004, or did it
after they did
all this information
investigation? The state ruled that it was Penny Bernstein's fault for identifying the wrong person, not that the cops had no wrongdoing, nor did the prosecutors.
Right. When did that report come out? Because that was the thing that really broke the case for the civil attorneys.
2004.
When of 2004?
I believe it might have been August, because I know he filed his lawsuit. Yeah.
Amy Lehman was deposed. Oh yeah, you're right. You're right, Melville. Yeah, Amy Lehman was deposed about her involvement on May 13th, 2005. So actually, I have the Pegel report here somewhere, so I can open that and tell you the exact date on it. But I think, Travis, another thing that you have to consider is in my mind, another thing you have to consider is the fact when you see both sides of the political aisle lining up against you, then you know that you're in trouble, right? That's what's happening. That was happening in Wisconsin with the Avery bill, right? There was some need to. They felt some need to clean house, and even though Pegel had tried to sweep this under the rug with her report, current Judge Jennifer Nashhold was the first author of. I don't know if you know, Jennifer is a judge in another, I don't know the right word is district, but it would obviously have to recuse herself. With that, the houses of the legislature saying, "Oh no, something really went wrong here." It's not clear that Peg's whitewash was going to hold. So this was extraordinary. The response that was happening in the state capitol, and you kind of think of what has to happen to make this all go away. Since he just got exonerated on DNA, something very extraordinary, or something very ironclad needs to happen to make this guy go away. And I don't necessarily believe it was about the money. A lot of people say that, even I've said that in the past, but really I think it was more about the potential erosion of Boss Hogg and Corruptawak, Kosurik, these small-time power brokers. Who knows, what level of stuff he has going on there. So there's a lot to be said. I know you've seen it 1,000 times, and you're probably right, but my instincts tell me that my gut feeling is
I'm not more right than anybody else. It's just when people try and tell me the logic of it is you've got, they're saying we've got this deposition coming up of Kosurik here, and this is when this incident happens, and they're taking just that. And my only point is, if you're going by logic and logic alone, Marie is 100 times better, because they could have forced that in October or November or December. They weren't limited that say, oh, well, the mom's not cooperating, she doesn't have the photo. If these guys did what people think they did at the extreme,
I mean,
which the extreme would be
Earl
murdering
Avery's,
Teresa, planning the Rev, planning everything else. It's much easier to coerce a mother and daughter by threatening that you're going to take away the kids into renewing that allegation. And I don't even think they talked to Marie initially. They did after the murder case was filed or the firearm charge was filed.
that's right.
They went and talked to her more, but they never did anything with that, because then they got the stuff from Brendan. But it's but who knows? I
don't think Marie was a minor,
when
by
people
the way.
say, well,
I think she was 17 years old.
She what?
She was 17.
I don't think she was a minor.
Oh,
she was 17 years old.
It would have been consensual.
There's a lot of names for that.
She says it was unconsensual. So he's looking at habitual offender sexual assault. It's a minimum of 60 years. To life without parole. But who knows? Maybe they're idiots and they forgot about it and thought, well, it'd be easier to go out and find a dead body and then get the car and plant that and plant blood. And
in the jail calls, in the jail calls, Stephen is talking to Dolores, and he wants to make sure that Dolores gets a certain set of letters out of the safe. And we know now, in hindsight, that those letters are letters that Marie wrote to Stephen, professing her love to him over and over again. And that's why Stephen kept those as sort of a weapon against that potential thing. And even in Earl Avery's interview on November 9th, the one that never happened in Queso, Millbilly, right? Yeah. He refused to talk. Earl Avery says, Marie's stepfather, Earl Avery says that Marie kind of fell for him, and we were having trouble keeping her away from him. He says that outright. I mean, that really kind of deflates that case a little bit. I agree with you that, okay.
Yeah, but then, somebody went and got the calls with Brendan, and there's that bad call talking to Marie. And where Brendan talks about how Stephen came over and hit him or something, and Marie in that phone call says, paraphrasing, you need to tell them that. They need to know what he's all about. And so, I mean, there's two sides to all of this. And my main point underlying this is a lot of people question why, or wonder why Zellner has certain things and not certain things, and why she came out and said unequivocally that I don't think law enforcement is involved in the disappearance and murder of Teresa Halbach, is because to go that other route, one, it was rejected by one jury, but number two, then you have these logical issues that you have to face where the state would say, you're saying that law enforcement is involved somehow in the planning or the planning and execution of this murder, why wouldn't they just deal with this with Marie? And I don't think there's a good answer for that legally, but that's where this thing comes down to, is Zellner's had to look at the forensics she has and what she's developed, which puts her in one lane. And then folks like yourselves who are researchers and sleuthers, armchair detectives, whatever phrase you want to use, but this group, y'all are legitimate researchers. You're not constrained by that lane that Zellner's in. But this is one of the reasons why some of the things that you all have brought out and discovered through your requests and research is she doesn't have that luxury. She would have to go back and be prepared to explain, if they were out to get him, why didn't they just nail his ass to the wall with Marie? And there's not really a logical explanation for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the key was really in his bedroom, and Teresa Hallback's DNA was really on Adam FL, and Adam FL was really in the garage since before the since the original investigation, I got bad news. I think he's guilty. I firmly believe that the key was planted. I think the hood flash swab was faked. I think that FL was planted.
Yeah, there's no question the key was
by
planted.
who? Millbilly's talking, but he's on mute.
Sorry. Go ahead.
One thing planted, it all is. If one thing's planted, it all is. You hear on the morning of
everything's certainly suspect.
The morning of the 7th, they're talking about wrapping up the investigation. They're done searching. They're gonna leave, and then we all know what happens. Infamous tree stump. But I'm gonna play that audio of Griesbach referring to the 85 case.
Prosecutors always say it, but I was just very frustrated with what my former colleagues did. And before I make that kind of bald-faced statement, I just want to hit you with a few brief facts. I think we each get about 15 minutes, so I'll try to be quick. But the Avery story starts at June 29th, 1985, so it's coming up on 30 years ago, 35, something like that. And the assault, it began with this brutal, vicious assault of a woman jogging along the Lake Michigan shoreline in Wisconsin. It's about the only time you can jog along the Lake Michigan shoreline, late summer. It's cold. And anyhow, she was a YMCA physical fitness instructor. And one of her daily routines would be to run 3 miles up the lake shore and 3 miles back. And it's a very isolated stretch of beach on Lake Michigan, and there was a fella who was hiding basically behind a tree close to the shore and lunged at Penny. Penny, I can use her name. She's the victim. She was very helpful in the book that I wrote. And when she was lunged at, she tried, of course, to escape. She angled off into the lake to avoid her attacker. She was afraid to jump in and swim because she thought he'd grab her and drown her and strangle her. But he did. He got her. As she came back toward the shore, he grabbed her and took her up the sand dunes, and he just brutally, viciously attacked her. She survived, which is amazing in its own right. But she was able to give an identification of her assailant. And this is where it starts to get at first it looks like it's pretty much a mistaken kind of wrongful conviction, because the police took a statement from her. She gave the description of her assailant, and where it turns into sort of a bias situation is in a smaller community like where I come from. The county's only 70,000 people, so some of the folks know each other. The assailant in this case was a well-known, or the person they thought was assailant was a well-known person among police. he had been involved in some other criminal activity. He was actually on bond at the time on bail for another offense. But the investigating officer almost immediately, based only on a very vague description of her assailant, thought that sounds like Stephen Avery. And unfortunately, Stephen Avery was known to the investigating officer. He lived right across the street. And further, Stephen Avery's uncle was a deputy in the sheriff's department. So the Avery family was sort of known. Now, this is a small community type thing, but the same sort of thing, if not knowing the people, the same kind of biases, I think, are relevant to larger offices that might start the police looking the wrong way. It moved on, though, to an identification process where they used the word unduly suggestive in the law. This went beyond unduly suggestive. The police had a mugshot of Stephen Avery brought up from his arrest prior to the case. And the folks who did the wrongful conviction lawsuit after the exoneration 18 years later are convinced that the mugshot of Stephen Avery was basically looked at by the police artist sketch. And then the artist sketch became the mugshot. So in a sense, they had their suspect working with a victim. They developed this artist sketch that looked, in the words of the trial court judge, had an uncanny resemblance with the mugshot. So already it looks like police are getting toward a situation where they know who it is and they're manipulating the evidence, kind of the opposite of what police and prosecutors are supposed to do. So it goes to trial, the case goes to trial, and despite 16 alibi witnesses and a time slip, a receipt from a Shopko, a department store in Green Bay, that showed it was virtually impossible for Mr. Avery to have committed the crime, the jury convicted Mr. Avery. And again, that's sort of a bias that even goes beyond.
Side note, 9 hours it took them to find him guilty.
Prosecutor, but to a community started to take.
Okay, so Millbilly, can you repeat for everybody who's talking and who they're talking to? Who's talking and who's he saying to?
It was a 3-panel they had down in Florida. This was, I think, a couple years ago, and it's Michael Griesbach talking about his involvement with the Stephen Avery case.
And he admits bias there is the way I take his comments, and that I think he was also, in the last 10 seconds you played, also inferring that the entire town, i.e. the jury, had a bias against Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Took
is
him
that the way
9
you
hours.
heard it?
Took him 9 hours
Basically,
to find him
yeah.
guilty. 18 witnesses stating that he was not there, and a receipt stating he was nowhere near where this occurred, and they still convicted him.
Yeah. The 18 witnesses were saying he would create with the family, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the documentary Outcry is about, in part, is that juries at that time, if someone had made a positive ID, and we saw this from the Innocence files, they did different cases, but they captured it on video. The victim was getting ready to go in and make the identification, and was talking about they weren't sure, and they're prodded, pushed, cajoled, whatever, into their initial identification is reinforced. Hey, you had it right the first time. This is extremely common with eyewitnesses to have doubts later on, but we have plenty of other stuff connecting. They'll lie to victims just like they lie to suspects. We have plenty of other stuff to connect this person to your crime that you were a victim of. And, they'll say things like, please, think about this hard so, this doesn't happen to somebody else. That's, that's their ace in the hole. And if they have to play that card, they'll play it, going back to why this was such a huge tragedy. Is that my understanding is that Gregory Allen had at least one, if not two, more victims of brutal sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. And he would harass his victims after the fact.
Yeah, but what about this? Right? This is the bit I don't get. Right? Is Stephen got done for the Penny attack, but before that, his whole history, apart from the Sandra Morris incident, is basically a couple of speeding fines.
Yep.
So why go after him for the Penny thing so hard and then come back and get him again so hard? Why him? I don't get it. And no matter how much research I've done, how much reading in the newspapers I've done, I can't find anything that warrants him to be attacked so badly for everything that he's innocent for, and to do so much time in jail, and and witnesses and everything, and they're just ignoring it all. And I just don't.
Him attacking Sandra Morris was attacking one of their own.
Yeah, true.
Picking up for that officer's wife. Boys in blue stay together. Their brotherhood.
Yeah, but he did his time for that.
I mean, majority of these police officers have businesses in these communities too.
But he was going to go down for the gun no matter what. I read his interview after that, and he copped right to it right away, and he was really upset. I would have been really upset. I have no doubt that she was saying the things that she, in a tavern, saying that he was doing all of these things out in public that I don't doubt, he wasn't doing. And then, unfortunately, it's like the NFL. It's the player who retaliates for bad conduct that's always thrown the flag for. And he got himself in a situation where, he put a gun on her, and for him to even possess a gun because of that burglary was a felony, and he was going to go down for that. I'm surprised from the newspaper article you pulled up and found, Millbilly, it sounds like they tried those completely two separate incidents together, and then the jury found him guilty on the gun charge and found him guilty on the sexual assault, and sentenced him to 6 years on the gun charge and whatever it was on the sexual assault. There's no way I would have let those two crimes be tried before the same jury.
Well, they're out to get him. He probably took him. Who knows what happened with him and the prosecutor?
Yeah, but that's not even
Travis,
even within the judge's
if we can prove to you,
go ahead.
If we can prove to you that the sketch that was created that night when Penny Bernstein was first being that the sketch was actually a trace of Stephen Avery, would that help sway you to a different opinion?
No,
because
there's no doubt in my mind they had
Dvorak
tunnel
said, yeah,
vision,
that sounds like
and
Stephen
yeah,
Avery,
they had
right?
tunnel vision and locked on, and the description. Yeah, he had scruffy hair and a scruffy beard. Oh, well, that's Stephen Avery, and then that guy was a clown.
To the point where
the sketch artist is a clown. I mean, that guy's a total clown. There's no doubt in my mind that he had the picture taped to a sketchboard, and that he had the paper that ultimately became the sketch overlaid on that. And she's saying, oh, and he had this and that. And they question him about that in the deposition.
Tell me about the timeline.
I'd love to read
the timeline that has to happen, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that they, you know,
How long did it take
they
them?
thought they were
to be true.
clairvoyant and they had their man, but
5 hours? 5 hours? This happened at 4:30 in the afternoon. They arrested him that evening.
yeah, and then the 15 people are all, you know, they're all family, so they're going to lie for him, and
They weren't all
you
family. That's not true.
you shouldn't believe them, or they're all under the Avery spell, and you know that's that's West Memphis 3 case on Jesse Miskelly.
Yeah,
He was at a wrestling match when those boys disappeared, and there's no way he could have committed the crime. But you know, they can unfortunately convinced him that he did, and then you have 3 boys being charged with capital murder. And no, that guy's deposition, and I've only seen clips of it. I'd like to read the whole transcript. Yeah, I framed it, you know, and he brings the frame to the deposition, and he's so proud. And then when asked, well, he's innocent. Well, I don't know that. And he starts going down that path. Well, I'm telling you, and he very ineptly tries to make the point that, look, you know, you all may be privy to that information. I'm not. It's only what I read in the paper. So, you know, I don't know. But, you know, if you're telling me the Wisconsin, you know, ultimately he finally gets a clue. I bet they took a break and his attorneys talked to him and said, you're looking like a total idiot. The Wisconsin Crime Lab has absolutely exonerated him. You drew the wrong guy. And the only thing you need to really focus on right now is it looks pretty clear that you sketched that sketch from a photograph of Stephen Avery, and you need to explain that. And then he starts to focus more on that. But yeah, I'd really like to read that transcript. But there's no doubt in my mind, and it happened all the time back then, that they would show, they would bring the victim in a back of a car and say, look, these are dark windows. He can't see you. We're going to drive you by this person, and you just let us know. And they drive them by, and they go, yeah, that's him. Once you see the person standing there on the, you know, on the sidewalk, and you're driven slowly by, there's no way you can unblock that. And photo arrays, you know, that's why they came up with all of these different things. On, you do a sequential array. You don't put them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You hold up a series of 6 photos. They're now told the person may or may not be one of these 6. It's no problem if you don't see the person. And then they do them one after another in sequence. You're not, in other words, you're not comparing people. And what your mind does is it fills in gaps, just like CD audio. And so you're making a comparison when it's a photo array. With sequential, you're making more of an identification. But you know, there are still departments all over the country that do what we call a 6-pack. They get 6 photos from driver's license photos or mug shots and try and make them as similar as possible and go from there. But look, a bumbling job on a prosecution won't get you past qualified immunity. And the retainer letter between Stephen and his attorneys said, we think your case is meritorious. It goes on, I just read it this afternoon getting ready for this, goes on for another 5 paragraphs to tell Stephen, look, we don't want you to get your hopes up. These cases are extremely challenging. And they go on to explain, or try to, qualified immunity. And qualified immunity worked the same way back then that it does now. You have to show that it's not mere negligence. It's not bumbling. You have to show more than that it's intentional. That, yeah, I knew there might have been other suspects, but he looked like my guy. That gets you qualified immunity. And where they had busted the case wide open, and where they really started getting people worried, is I don't know, they had the backup interviews. They didn't have just the Lautenschlager report. They had the backup interviews. And all of those people were interviewed by AG investigators. And they were given hard questions about, why didn't you do anything when you got the phone call? Why didn't you do this? Now, to conclude it's the victim's fault, atrocious. But they had those statements under oath going into those depositions. That's why they were so effective against these folks, is, you told this investigator this, and now you're trying to deny that. And they looked foolish. And what they did is take a case that could have been blown out on qualified immunity and made it an awesome case, which is why it would be interesting to know when those statements were taken and when that report was done. The depositions, I think, started in May, June of, is it 04, Jeff?
05.
05.
The depositions were
Okay.
05. Yeah.
Okay. And then the incident was October 31, maybe, of 05. And then Marie's outcry to her mother, and her mother's calling up the police.
September of 04.
A year prior.
Yes.
Okay. That was a mistake on my part. For some reason, I had in my mind it was right in the middle of all of that. So it was a year prior. Okay.
Yes.
But they were very clear that the statements that were taken by the AG investigators just monumentally made their case. Monumentally, they were going to be able to prove in federal court that this wasn't mere bungling. It wasn't mere tunnel vision. Wasn't mere confirmatory bias. That there were intentional omissions, like receiving information that this guy confessed to a crime somebody's in prison for, and then doing nothing about it except having a memo constructed the day they found out Stephen was going to be released, right? That's when they had Colburn do a memo.
They had a meeting the day after he was released, and that's when Colburn wrote his report about the Brown County phone call.
That went into the famous safe, right?
Yeah.
So Jeff, I agree with you that there's conduct in the department that is utterly reprehensible. There's no question. In the 85 case, as well as the Halbach murder, but you don't. They had so much, you don't even need to get into the motive. Stephen didn't have to prove motive in that civil case. He just needed to show conduct that violated his constitutional rights. And whether that was enough of a motive to be behind planting the key, I mean, there's just no question that the key was planted. And, now FL, the bullet, and FK, those bullets are self-explanatory. Those don't necessarily need to be planted. That could be done either through negligence, inadvertence, or intentional, more reprehensible conduct by Sherry Culhane, because FK had no DNA on it, and it looks like, like Raleigh said, he shot, what was it, a brick, 2 bricks, at least 2 bricks on that.
And
3,000. He missed at least 3,000.
Not to mention, Steve, if you listen to jail calls, you hear Steven talking to Jody, and they're referencing an incident. They were standing in front of the garage, shooting at the burn barrel with Bobby. And then Steven's complaining about all the gun shells that Bobby leaves around because he has to constantly go pick them up because he runs them over with the lawnmower and they go flying. So it's not just Rolly, all of them. But Steven didn't own a gun, but he did go deer hunting in 2004.
So it certainly could, Sherry Culhane could have been complicit in what happened with FL, but the cops did go to that garage on March 1st or maybe the 2nd, and jackhammered the floor because of all the blood, right? That's must have seeped into the cracks because of Brendan's confession, and they claim they found that bullet, right? Which had magically, as Zellner puts it, mysteriously evaded the searches in the early part of November. Mysteriously evaded those searches, but yet they found it right under that air compressor where you can see a flashlight shining. So to me, Culhane could have been complicit, but you don't get to FL without the cops being complicit in that.
Look at what they do when they go there in November. They barely even touch the garage. They remove the rear door off the Suzuki and then leave. When Brendan makes his confession, they tear that whole garage apart. They do the same thing they did to his house to the garage.
Yeah, and
they're shell casings from the garage.
Going back again to the legal side of it, from my viewpoint, the legal part, it's unfortunately you can't make those arguments in a brief, and why the comments are Zellner's comments about the challenge to Andy Colburn. Those are in social media, but they're not in the brief. We need somebody to respond to that reward and come forward and talk about what they saw. And unfortunately, things are shut down in all courts.
Joe Biden spent 40 years.
40 years. I'd like to see. I'd like to see, some of the discovery going forward in Colburn's civil case, because some of these things can be addressed, and that some of these dots can be connected. They won't help in the appeal, but they would certainly help if it's remanded for an evidentiary hearing. Those things could be helpful.
Well, on January 20th of 2020, either the defense or the prosecution for the Colburn's case, they requested Exhibit 9 from the Stephen Avery's 85 case.
Say that one more time, Millbilly, because I'm trying to put that together spatially, and it sounded important.
January 20th of 2020.
Okay.
And if you look at Stephen Avery's 85 case,
I saw today there was a bunch of open records requests in January of this year. I thought that was you.
Yeah, that was me. I was talking about that. Exhibit 9, which is Colborn's testimony. I'm sure it's have to do. I mean, the fact that
were all of those requests in January your team, you and your team?
I was given to me from somebody else.
It doesn't say who made the request. There was 5 or 6 open records requests of the clerk in the 85 criminal case that I pulled up today in January of this year. And that's why I figured you wanted to talk about this today. Is I know that you all have been digging up information relative to the 85 case and the civil case. I just assumed it was you guys.
Well, let's talk about what just happened in his case with that lady writing Gundam.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Stupid move.
Pardon?
Is it a stupid?
Yeah. I don't. It's not. Well, for someone that's not used to dealing in courts and knowing the rules in a courthouse, the rules that we're under as advocates about contacting a judge alone, that's called ex parte. It's absolutely prohibited, but I don't think it was done intentionally or on purpose, but people who aren't around courtrooms and whatnot don't know that, it's totally improper to do that. They may have felt it's not improper to do something like that with an elected official. You can send an elected official whatever you want to encourage them to grant a pardon, let's say, or to approve your property for certain zoning, but it all has to be disclosed. But when something's in the court, no, you don't want to be sending a judge a bouquet of flowers celebrating their decision in circuit court. You don't want to be sending, factual packets to appellate court judges. And so,
what about sending flowers?
No flowers.
That's what he said.
Yeah, no.
Man, Travis, a question on that. Not the flower.
But let me just finish one.
Do you put your legal?
No,
because
it's not.
If you don't,
I don't want to say it's
what would
stupid,
stop anybody?
It's not. It's unwise. I don't think she's stupid. I don't think. I think it identified her on the docket. From what I understand, she's a supporter, and I hope people do not give her a bad time. It's just a lesson learned for everybody. It's not, it's not a wrestling match where, you cheer for the guy in the white mask or the blue mask. It's, you let it run through its process, and the only people that are allowed to participate in the process are the attorneys for the parties, or if you file a motion and get permission to file what's called an amicus brief, where you're a friend of the court. And barring that, and don't everybody start trying to file, figure out how do we file a motion for an amicus brief. It's not that type of thing. You're just advocating a legal principle on behalf of a group that you support, like the Prosecutors Association or the Defense Attorneys Association or whatever it may be. But no, it worked the way it was supposed to. I don't know if it ever got to Gundam. I don't know if it was just filed in the clerk's office and they did what they're supposed to do, which is announce it on the docket, make the court aware of it. And the court did in an order they said they were going to take no action. But Jeff, what were you going to say? I'm sorry to cut you off.
I get no problem at all. What if there's no legal jeopardy to the sender, what's to stop you from potentially trying to use this tactic to maybe have a reverse influence? Say you weren't a supporter, you were a guilter. Could you start sending letters to judges to try and influence who might be the judge there? And if it it seems to me that this ought to be illegal. And go ahead.
Yeah, that's a problem. So, people were speculating, well, I wonder what Gundrum thought. And even if it got to him, which, I don't know, if it was sent to the clerk's office, they would have looked at it. See, a clerk's office is required to receive everything. They don't get to decide what they're going to accept, not accept. They have to receive everything. Now, whether they file it or not, they are allowed to look at the rules. And so, for example, if a motion gets filed by an attorney who's in the case, attorney of record, but it exceeds the page limit, they'll make a notation, received, and then not filed because it exceeds the page limitation. But no, as soon as I heard about it, no one mentioned any names or anything, but I thought, who would have been dumb enough to do that? And, I jumped to conclusions, and no, it can have an adverse impact. If it got to a judge and they got 5-6 pages into it, because they may have a stack of stuff on their desk, judge, this is what's come in, especially in these times, probably goes to their home, and they read a brief, and then okay, what's this? And they get 5 or 6 pages into it. And it's like, what the hell is this crazy nonsense? And then they see, and they send it back to the clerk, but no, it could put a bad taste in a judge's mouth, and they could say, yeah, they were right. He does have a bunch of crazy people supporting him, which isn't true at all. And it's someone well-meaning and well-intentioned doing something that is totally against the rules in court and amongst court personnel and attorneys, but is part of modern day discourse in political arena, sending a letter to your congressman or whoever, or here's the information I heard you were interested in regarding this particular situation. That's all fine and acceptable outside the courtroom, but when there's a pending case, I know of lawyers after the Supreme Court has ruled will send letters to justices saying, I really think you got it right on this issue, or, I respectfully disagree. They'll get fan mail, but on a pending case, if you had like a big campaign, for example, to flood the court with mail and letters, it's utterly inappropriate, and I think it could very well result in a backlash. This one filing, no, not at all. But if that became a campaign, that someone suggested that and started having videos on it, or a marathon thing about, there's a big difference between signing a petition, an online petition, and sending something on a pending case to one of the judges that could potentially rule on it. Now, you you all and I talked in the past about, there's 4 justices in that Division 2, Circuit 2, and Gundrum was one of the 4. We didn't think he would even sit on the case and decide it because of his prior involvement with Stephen on the Avery bill. So, it's no harm, no foul, and it's a good lesson learned. But yeah, it can. I've seen it have a substantial impact where family members wrote a judge, and the letters got to him directly, and he said he read 1 or 2 before he realized what he was reading, and that he didn't feel comfortable sitting on the case any longer. He was going to recuse himself. And both sides were begging him, that judge, to stay on. And it went to another judge, and that did not end up well for that particular defendant to be with that judge, because the judge said, no, I just don't feel comfortable being on the case anymore. I respect and I appreciate, both sides believe I can remain fair, but I don't know that I can remain fair to both sides. So I'm out. And then it went back to luck of the draw, and it worked out very, very poorly for that person. So there are many, many, many reasons why you don't want to be sending stuff to the court unless you're a lawyer in the case. And why, we even have clients that do it, that feel that, they can argue their position better, that a position they want argued isn't being argued. And so they'll send a letter to the judge themselves, and it's usually caught by the judge's secretary and disclosed to both sides. And there's usually stuff in there that hurts us more than it helps us. And then we calmly explain to the client why, this hurts, and, not to be doing it again. But no, it can have a serious backlash effect. What's
T1.
Is he waiting for Millbilly to dance? T-Bone. I can't see any of the comments or anything. Hello to everybody. How is everybody safe at home? No problem.
The original was sort of, what's
what are you laughing at, Millbilly? That he keeps locking up, or what?
No.
Sorry,
Jamie and T1 in the chat.
Oh boy,
T1. I'm still laughing at T1.
I'll have to go back and look at what they're saying. What's Jamie got to say?
I can show you.
Okay, so that was a serious question. Is everybody doing well at home? Everybody safe?
Yeah, I'm fine. Everybody in the chat?
How yes. Are they keeping you safe at work, Millbilly?
Stir craziness is probably the most.
Dude, I've been working so much, it's ridiculous. This is day 1 of my vacation. I'm off for 5 days. But
at work, have they been taking it seriously? And
yeah, take my temperature every time someone comes in, whether they work there or not. Let's say if it's a maintenance person working on a refrigerator or something, take their temperature. They all have to be wearing masks before they enter the building.
And then does anyone have kids in school? I have a senior in high school, and we had the option of sending him back for live classroom, or keeping him the first 3 weeks of school. So that would put us in mid-September. We had the option to stay at home and do Zoom virtual classroom, and we went for that option because my parents, I moved them down a couple of 3 years ago, and did I say that right, Millbilly? Couple of 3 years ago, I moved my parents down. They're 81 and 89. So we just really can't risk it. But any of you all have kids in school, and what are you all doing?
Yeah, I got 2 kids, and they're online learning.
Yeah.
It all depends on where you live.
I have 2 as well, and one of my oldest is really struggling with the idea of how to go back. You know, she just not going to do well learning. You know, she's in college now, and she just needs that. But you know, with the current situation, who knows what? And my youngest, I think she's probably the same way. And I think our school system is still trying to figure out what to do with regard to, you know, either an online or a hybrid program. I think it's looking hybrid right now. Jamie again.
Well, it ain't going to be me, Jamie.
I don't know.
Yeah. My niece just went back for her sophomore year at a large, really good school in California, but it's large, and you know, they've done a lot of things on the housing, and all of her classes are going to be virtual. But I don't know. I just couldn't imagine, you know, all of the positive things I got from undergrad. There's just, you know, the friends I made that are still my friends to this day, and on and on and on. There's no way you're going to get that from a virtual experience. So I hope things get back to normal soon.
I don't think they will. Not for a while.
Well, I can tell you that I have a technical degree, and I'm really worried for the kids, sophomores, juniors, seniors last year. You just can't afford to miss. I'm sorry, the math and the science probably goes for girls who want to be nurses too, and doctors. You can't afford to miss that math and science of the 3 years. And what they did last year was sort of mail it in. I mean, there's, you know, let's call it what it is. It was not any learning experience. It was, did you show up? And you know, it didn't really matter the whole answer on it, as long as you turned and had some type of hint, as long as it was semi-readable, then you got credit for doing it. There was no learning there at all, and you just can't afford, you know, if you're some type of professional career, just to mail it in for your junior and senior year. So,
hey, there's Andrew.
That's they have to fix it. Yeah, he's stirring the pot.
Yeah, no, it's there are compelling arguments on multiple RAVs, no question, and why I've remained in the one RAV camp is just because legally that's what the posture is. And so I kind of confine myself to what can be argued legally. And so, you know, there's those two things again, you know, legally, you know, what can be properly argued and what would be an effective argument. And then, you know, this side of it, looking outside the box as to why things may have occurred, or and so I've said this before, generally any theory that takes more than 3 people to pull off, you know, and that's just because from law, you know, we're taught judges are going to quit listening if the conspiracy requires more than 3 people. And the saying in law enforcement and And
It
it,
did kill 3 people.
criminal, you know, you could
Link,
keep well,
Jacob.
how many?
3. Colborn, Link, and Jacobs.
What about the owner of the car?
That they got from the salvage yard?
What about DMV? What about...
They have all the connections to everything they could use to pull this off.
What about the lab?
The lab?
Yeah. What about the FBI when they came to scan the car?
The FBI was given the seats. They didn't actually see the car.
No, they came and did a laser scan with a Leica system on it.
Yeah, I looked over all them photos, and
yeah, the Leica scan is, you know, it just goes into a program, and they were trying to find other prints. Plus, they do what they call a dot cloud. It's a Leica total station. But yeah, I know what you're saying. So possibly 3. Then you could have multiple conspiracies of 2 or 3. You could have the conspiracy on the key, conspiracy on FL.
Well, how many people did it take for them to finger him for the penny thing? We got Jean Couchet drawing the sketch, Dvorak referencing it being Steve Avery, and the sheriff.
It didn't even need to be a conspiracy. That train wreck went into motion because they all hated him. I don't think they could have set out to prove. The 2 scenarios with Penny are it happens that passerby helps save her and doesn't get to see the attacker. They get her medical treatment right away. And so the police at that time could have said, I don't care who did this, make it thick on Stephen. Or what I think really happened was they got a description and someone said, that sounds like Stephen. And it took off from there. And I think they did stuff intentionally, like feeling, well, we need to really make this stick. He's got 15 alibi witnesses, and they go out and do stupid stuff like plant the key next to a cabinet, take a groin swab and rub item FL with a groin swab that never should have been taken but was never thrown away. But that just takes stupidity and ill motive in concert with one another. You get somebody with confirmatory bias saying, that sure sounds like Steve Avery, and then somebody agreeing, and they don't even have to reach an agreement for a conspiracy in the normal sense. But it was why they were going to win that case, and they were going to get a substantial settlement from it.
Well, it's easier to trick somebody than to prove to them that they've been tricked. But
I saw Stacy Seabrook made a comment in the chat.
What did Stacy say?
If I could just say to him that I thought he just made a generic, I thought, innocence comment. But if I could just take a second to say that, Stacy, that I found your Eric Cozy memorial song very moving, and thank you for doing it along with all the other music that you create, because that's incredibly intelligent, persuading, and moving as well. So thanks for doing what you do.
I second that Thank you.
I wish I had half the talent, a quarter of the talent.
I can play. I can't sing for the life of me. But I want to thank you all for coming on tonight, especially Travis, Big Jeff, Kelly, Captain. Thank you much, usually. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
When is Richard's service? Can you announce that?
August 29th at 3 p.m. Central Time for me. So 1 o'clock Western, and it'd be 4 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, if I don't talk to you all before, and Jeff, I'll shoot you an email and we'll talk about those transcripts. I'd be happy to look at them for you. If I don't see you all before, I'll.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if I'll be seeing you, or I don't know if there's going to be a chat going, or probably not. But I'll be with you all there, and then if somebody has something afterwards,
I plan on it.
I'll see y'all there. I'm still processing that.
Yeah, I'm thinking we all are. I still can't. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Guys,
I'm still stunned. Yeah.
Y'all have a good night.